Let's take a few minutes to talk about the labs for this course. And I want to give credit to Professor Zahedi, who has taught this course previously, as much of the advice that I'm going to give is based on the advice that he would give. And one of the things that I want to point out is that this is a difficult lab. It will consume a lot of time, and you want to avoid this situation. Don't start it at the end of the semester. You're just making your own life very difficult if you do. So groups are always 4 members, not 5, always 4. And if you want to go down to 3 group members, this requires some justification and needs to be approved by our lab instructor. You also have to understand that the difficulty requirements of the lab don't change, but the difficulty of doing it with fewer people may increase. And groups can be split up if you're really not getting along with somebody's not pulling their weight, but this is discouraged. You can see the procedure for this in the lab manual for the course if you really must consider that. With that said, please take the time and choose carefully who your lab group is going to be, because this is going to be a lot of work, and choosing well means you will have a much better time. I also want to encourage you to start on the labs as early as possible. Planning and estimation are very difficult, and new things will pop up all the time, right? Leaving this to the last minute is a recipe for disaster because you never really know what's going to happen. You will encounter a bug that you've never seen before, and it takes a lot of time to fix. And you don't want to be in the situation at the end of term where nothing is working and everything is fine. It is tempting to be optimistic and say, oh yeah, this sounds easy and we can definitely do it, and then get stuck down some debugging rabbit hole. So programmers are kind of eternal optimists, Professor Zahedi would say. But we really encourage you to start the project early. Doing as much as you can as early as you can is beneficial, particularly because as the term goes on, other courses will have other things that are also important and also due. So don't sleep on this. So to complete the lab effectively, right, the work needs to be divided up. And I mean, however you want to do it is up to you. This image may make you deeply uncomfortable, but it is a way to divide up a sandwich, although I don't know that I would necessarily call it a great way to divide up a sandwich, but like it works, right? And as your group members, you need to decide how you intend to divide the work. You do have to recognize, however, that overhead increases as you have more and more coordination amongst your different group members, right? Anytime you are dividing up a task, you are necessarily introducing the overhead of deciding who does what and recombining it, plus whatever communication is necessary to complete the task while it's going on. But we talked about that in ECE 252 when we talked about the speed up that we benefit by using multiple threads. But here's a few suggestions, and you choose what works for you, right? None of these options is provably optimal. Definitely you should always choose the provably optimal one. You decide amongst your group members what you would like to do. And option 1 is functional, so it's based on what you implement. So one person is responsible for adding functionality A, another person is responsible for adding functionality B, third person is responsible for adding some other functionality, and that can work, and that is how my group did our 4th year design project, and amongst the people in our group, I personally ended up with the bucket that I describe as else, which is the things that were not assigned to anybody else because somebody did the front-end component and somebody did the hardware interaction, and somebody else had some other tasks, and then I was left with things like scheduling because, yeah, that just sort of fell into the else bucket. It wasn't allocated to anything else. Another idea is to divide it up by task. And task is, so someone is responsible for a lot of the design, someone is responsible for implementation, someone is responsible for testing. This sort of thing is interesting. I don't know that I would necessarily choose it, but maybe it works the best for you. Then there's time-based. Who has time to work on this right now? Like, here's the most urgent thing, and anybody can pick up any task at any time, and you can just go with it. And you're not busy right now because you finished this other assignment, so you're going to make progress. And optionally, you can add to any of the above things, someone being your product or project manager, where their whole focus is about managing the communication and trying to make sure that everything works the way that it's supposed to work. You're meeting the specification and that things are on plan. So, I mean, the functional approach, like I say, is interesting, and it's what I did for my FYDP. It does require a good amount of communication about how the different parts of the software are going to talk to each other. And if you don't have that, and you don't have sort of good APIs, then it will be difficult because expectations don't always align, right? Having it task-based may not be ideal for you, right? Design may be somebody's specialty, and that's great, but it might be actually fairly difficult to implement and test, and this may lead to sort of an uneven balance of work. But debugging is hard, right? So maybe everybody is involved in that. And the time-based approach doesn't necessarily result in fair workloads either, because there's always a possibility that somebody who works very efficiently ends up doing more than a reasonable share of the project. So it's going to be an interesting decision. You could almost think of it as practice for how you would like to organize your FYDP. Thing is, more people in your group means there's more communication, and more communication counts as more overhead. You could say it scales that n squared. Right? Any change you make has to be propagated to more people, and you have to make sure that everybody has agreement about stuff. And you should err on the side of over-communication. This is also advice that I give to people about working remotely, is that if you're not sure, err on the side of over-communication, because that's much better than misunderstandings, right? When we don't state certain assumptions, or we're unclear about how something is supposed to work, it's entirely possible that somebody sort of gets the wrong idea. Index starts at 0 or index starts at 1, something like that. Easy to make opposite assumptions about, and then, oh no, we did two different things, and then the software doesn't work. We have to try to debug what is going on. Hey, why is there the segmentation fault? Well, here's why. So misunderstandings will happen, but communication will reduce them. Another thing that I think is really important is to write down decisions and write down important information. The "oh, I will remember" thing is not true. One of the lies that we tell ourselves quite frequently is, I'll remember this, or we'll remember later on why we decided something that we decided. And writing these things down is just going to be very useful in terms of understanding the thinking. Why did we do the thing that we did, or why is it this way? But also helps because, when you are working in this group, you will have discussions, and there'll be lots of back and forth, and you talked about 3 different options, and why did you choose the one that you chose? It will be good a month later to know why that was the case. In terms of decision making, well, there's a couple of approaches, and there's a time and a place for each. And as the African proverb goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right? Individual decisions are fast, but group decisions may be the best, even though they take a little bit longer. Getting everybody together to make the decision necessarily takes more time sometimes than it would take for a person to decide on the thing individually. But if we have too many individual decisions that don't consider input and the big picture from everybody else, then that is going to probably result in things that don't work together when you try to combine them. Most things are fixable, but it's just a question of how much extra effort are you willing to put in. My recommendation on this is let the person who knows the most about the problem or the area make the final call about what should happen in some particular area or some particular subject. If this person is the one who knows the most about semaphores and how they are supposed to work, right, let them have the final call about whether you should choose option A or option B for the implementation. On the other hand, decisions do need to be made with somewhat of a zoomed out view. And if you have someone who is your official or unofficial system architect, they have the big picture view, then certainly getting their input, if they're not necessarily a decision maker, will be valuable because, yeah, at a larger view, it will reveal things that might not be obvious when you're thinking about it at a low level. Did I mention that you should write down decisions? Because absolutely you should. But another thing that is important is that when a decision is made, even if you disagree, it's important to go with it. And this is one of those principles, like amongst startup founders, I think it's called disagree and commit, which is, listen, you might not agree with the decision, but whoever has the ultimate authority, or if the group has voted, even if you don't like the decision, go with it. You will have much less strife and much less difficulty, just acknowledging the fact that not everything is going to go quite how you hope it will go, and there's no benefit to reopening closed subjects to argue them again. Another thing that I want to point out is that it's important that you choose group members with compatible work styles. And when some group asks me if I will be consultant for their capstone/FYDP group, I have lots of questions for them, but in terms of group dynamics, I have 3 major questions that are really important. And your actual answer doesn't matter as much as, does everybody in the group have the same answer? And question 1, are you like really ahead of the game, or are you a really last minute person? I had a bad time with a particular lab in my 2A term because I partnered with someone who was super smart, but they were a very last minute person, and I'm really not. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody who's taken a class with me before. And it was stressful because I wanted to work on the thing, and he, that's no big deal, we have plenty of time. And we did fine, we accomplished the goal, and we managed to get everything done. But I didn't have a good time because it was very stressful. My second question is, have you worked together before? If everybody has worked together before, then you know what your working styles are like. You know how you communicate, and you understand what that's going to be like. And another important question, maybe the most important question, how far do you want to take this? When I talk about capstone groups, I mean, there's the possibility that you want to start a company based on this, but for the purpose of this course, like, does everybody in the group agree on how much they want to do this? Because there's some people for whom, listen, we just want to pass, we don't have to get a top grade, and if things work well enough, that's good. And for other people, they want to do super well, they want to get 100%, and if you don't agree, it's going to be a very difficult experience to work together. Because, well, yeah, you want to do more and the other person doesn't, and trying to get them to do more is hard, and it causes stress, and it causes everybody to be unhappy. So make sure you have this conversation with the people that you're going to work with. Know that you have compatible working styles, know that you have compatible communication styles, and have an understanding in your group before you start about how serious you are about getting 100%, getting every detail right, going the extra mile. So some general advice that I have is, number 1, communication is key. I already told you to write things down 2 times, and now I'm going to tell you to do it a 3rd time. So make sure that you are communicating, because working in a group like this is hard. Number 2, planning is valuable even if things don't go to plan. It's tempting to just open the code editor and say, you know what, I'm going to just jump right in, and I'm going to start writing code, and by the end of this, all will be said and done. Probably not, but planning is valuable. Understanding what it is you need to do and giving yourself a little breakdown of, this is the objective, and we expect by week X to have completed this much of the project. That sort of thing will be very valuable, even though, the plan will not go exactly the way you imagine. No software plan ever has and probably never will, and that's okay. But planning gives you a better understanding of what the things are and what your options are and how you would like to go about it. Number 3, don't stay mad if someone makes a mistake or misses a meeting. People will be imperfect. Everyone's human, as the saying goes. And yeah, I mean, people will make these mistakes, and being mad isn't constructive, right? So don't be that person. If you are missing a meeting that you should have attended, or you're not testing your code well enough or whatever, that's something you should improve on. But don't stay mad at your other group members, because being mad at each other is quite detrimental to actually completing the project. It's about the work and about getting the work done, and there's no sense in sort of getting hung up about it. It's better to sort of get over it sooner rather than later. Item 4 on the list is put ego to the side. Sometimes this means that you're not going to get your way in a decision, or some code that you wrote needs to be thrown away and rewritten, and that's not pleasant, but it's, again, about the work. It is about making the project the best project it can be, and if that means that your contribution that you work really hard on is going to get replaced with a different version or a different approach, that's just how it is. And so anything you can do to sort of put your ego to the side is beneficial. And that ties into also the next thing about good coding practices, which is if you want to make a good software project, it's just like you would on a co-op term. You should use version control, you should use Git, you should write tests, and they should be automated tests. Code reviews are very valuable, and putting aside your ego in a code review, although it can be difficult, is quite important. The goal, again, is to make the best software that you can, and you've learned about lots of good coding practices, and probably you've observed some bad coding practices on your co-op terms, so you know what not to do. But using good coding practices definitely increases the likelihood of having a good and well-functioning project. And as we've seen, testing is necessary, and you should test all along the way, not just at the end. And this includes both unit tests and integration tests. Both of these things are important. The unit tests for the individual stuff that you've written, and integration tests to make sure that your part can talk with the parts written by someone else. But also you should test with random timing changes. You don't want code that relies on very particular timing or fortunate timing. It is unfortunately a reality that when you have code that is timing sensitive like that, it will work perfectly fine in your tests and then crash when it's being evaluated by the TAs, or give the wrong answer when it's evaluated by the TAs. So it is unfortunate, but that's how life is. So do try messing with the timing to make sure that it doesn't break things. And to close out this particular topic, I want to say that we know that the labs are not easy, but they are intended as a very valuable learning experience. And as JFK says, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. I'm not going to try to impersonate him. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Right? The lab is difficult, and it's difficult to challenge you so that you can improve, so that you can grow, so that you can succeed. And it's not intended to be just sort of casually, just implement this linked list and it only takes a little bit of time and you're all done. It is intended to be a challenging collaborating project, collaboration within your own group, and ideally at the end of it, although it's a difficult experience, it makes you better, and that's why we have it this way. So that concludes what we have to say about the labs. So please do look over the lab manual, and please, once again, choose wisely who you would like to be in your group and have those important conversations, and get started early.